During the late 1800s, there was a series of economic advancements. These advancements became known as the beginning of the Gilded Age. During the Gilded Age, many different influential businessmen arose to economic power. One such businessman was Andrew Carnegie, who was a philanthropist who set the bar for big businesses during this time. Through various different means, he managed to get to the top of the steel industry and died as one of the richest men in American history. One such mean was the act of greatly underpaying his men, while also greatly overworking them. This resulted in a rumor that he was just fabricating a system in which he created slaves and justified this through payment. Carnegie utilized corruption as a way to push the American economy forward in a time of instability. These corrupt methods of business caused his workers to see him as a slave owner who used paternalistic ideas to justify his mistreatment of his workers.
Andrew Carnegie was born on November 25, 1835, in Dunfermline, Scotland. As a Scottish-American industrialist and philanthropist, he pushed the American steel industry and eventually became the richest man in the world. His father was a weaver and his mother opened a small grocery store and mending shoes. But the Industrial Revolution brought the creation of the steam-powered loom, and his father eventually lost his job. Fearing for her family's survival, Carnegie's mother decided that the best route would be to move to America and search for opportunity. He truly had a story of rags to riches, something common during the Gilded Age. After selling his company to J.P. Morgan for $480 million, Andrew Carnegie officially became the richest man in the world.
Carnegie was a very interesting and intuitive man. He was or is the embodiment of the rags to riches story. He grew up in a small Scottish family, and his family was not very wealthy at all. Growing up in America, his father got a job in a cotton factory, and Andrew worked in the same building as a bobbin boy, only making about $1.20 a week. He performed various other jobs, and he thought that the best option was to accept every opportunity and make the most out of each one. For example, he received a job as a messenger boy in the city's telegraph office. He memorized the street layout of Pittsburgh and other names and addresses that belonged to those whom he delivered goods. This, of course, only lasted for a short period of time until he was able to go into business with the Pennsylvania Railroad, where he worked as a superintendent of the Pittsburgh division. He later resigned and turned to the bridge company and worked there for about 3 years, where he was able to gain $50,000 throughout his working experience. 2 years later, Carnegie obtained his steel refining business, and in which he would work for another 30 years.
It is well known that Andrew Carnegie was a man who gave much of his money for the good of the community. His beliefs that anyone could become a member of big business really gave false hope, even though he himself was a rags to riches story. This is mainly why he was considered to be a captain of industry to a lot of people to this day. But many of his friends that were used to get where he was were not exactly proper. In the Homestead strike, Carnegie went on a trip to Scotland and left Henry Clay Frick in charge while he was gone. During this time, profits rose 60%, but Frick only wanted to increase wages by 30%. Workers began to refuse to go to by the new condition and were locked out by Frick, only to begin a strike. With an overwhelming amount of workers on strike, Frick called in 300 Pinkerton guards to break it up. After the whole ordeal, 9 strikers and 7 Pinkerton guards were killed, along with several others injured. Governor William Stone sent for 8,000 troops and eventually broke up the strike. Workers were forced to sign yellow dog contracts if they wanted to keep working, and those who left were blacklisted. British statesman William E. Gladstone sent a letter of sympathy to Carnegie, and in reply, Carnegie sent a letter stating,
"This is the trial of my life. Such a foolish step, contrary to my ideals, repugnant to every feeling in my nature. Our firm offered all it could offer, even generous terms. Our other men had gratefully accepted them. They went as far as I could have wished, but the false step was made in trying to run the homestead works with new men. It is a test to which working men should not be subjected. It is expecting too much from poor men to stand by and see their work taken by others. The pain I suffer increases daily. The works are not worth one drop of human blood. I wish they had sunk.
Rather than being a man of his word, Carnegie said that he was behind the choices that Frick made and that the plan was to shut down until the workers buckled. After the strike ended, workers were to Carnegie the fact that he could create steel cheaply meant the efficiency should rise. Cheap steel led to lower worker wages, less worker security, and higher numbers of worker deaths. Unskilled workers were hired since machines were replaced. Workers were forced to work 12 hours a day, which meant injuries were imminent. Women and children began to accept the whistle of dread that signaled another accident has occurred.
'Twas in Pennsylvania town not very long ago. Men struck against reduction of their pay. Their millionaire employees with philanthropic show had closed their work till starved they would obey. They fought for home and right to live where they had toiled so long. But ere the sun had set, some were laid low.
Workers saw Andrew Carnegie as a robber baron, which made them feel like they were being used for Carnegie's own personal interests. After the Homestead strike, a few workers were accused of murder and were arrested as a result of this. Those who left the job were blacklisted by Carnegie. Many workers soon after created unions to retaliate against Carnegie's response to the workers, who went against his methods. As a result of this, however, the workers were given yellow dog contracts, which meant that the workers were not allowed to strike if they worked under Carnegie's business or if they joined the workers' union while working for him. Andrew Carnegie's wealth and fortune allowed him to push America's economy forward, but it also came with a cost. Many of Andrew Carnegie's workers were mistreated and suffered from dangerous working conditions and low minimum wages. Andrew Carnegie's corrupt methods gained him infamy from his workers, and as a result of this, many labor unions were formed to go against these kind of methods by robber barons. Andrew Carnegie's corrupt methods would have usually allowed Carnegie to make major profits off of his workers. Events such as the Homestead strike is an example of a retaliation against Carnegie's work ethics by the workers.